Hello everyone. Before the story start, tell me where are you watching from and what time is it?
The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the streetlight, the wet pavement, the ordinary night. I was about to cross the street when I felt it. A droplet. Small and cool, hitting my cheek. I reached up to wipe it away, thinking it was leftover rain from the trees above. But as my fingers touched my cheek, I realized something impossible. The droplet had come from below. I looked down. The pavement was wet, gleaming, ordinary. But directly beneath where I stood, a single drop of water was rising from the ground. It lifted slowly, impossibly, defying every law I knew. It rose past my knee, past my waist, past my chest, heading toward my face. I stumbled back, staring at the rising droplet. It continued upward, unhurried, until it reached the level of my eyes. Then it stopped. Hovered. Waited. I looked around. Other droplets were rising now. From every puddle, every patch of wet pavement, water was lifting into the air. They rose in slow motion, a gentle rain in reverse, defying gravity with a patience that felt almost deliberate. I stood in the middle of it, droplets rising all around me, passing my face, my shoulders, my outstretched hands. They climbed toward the sky, toward the clouds they had fallen from hours ago, as if time had reversed itself for water alone. One droplet paused in front of my eyes. I reached out to touch it. My finger passed through, and it continued upward, joining the others in their impossible ascent. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me through the rising rain, droplets parting around her like she belonged to a different law. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "You see it," she said. I nodded, unable to speak. She looked up at the rising droplets, then back at me. "Gravity is a habit," she said. "Not a law. Most of the time, things fall. But sometimes, when the world remembers, they can rise." I watched the droplets climb higher, disappearing into the darkness above. "Why now?" I asked. "Why here?" She smiled. That small smile. "Because you're ready to see. Because you've learned that the world doesn't always do what you expect. Because some things need to go back to where they came from." She reached up and caught a rising droplet in her palm. It rested there for a moment, then continued upward, released. "Everything that falls wants to rise again," she said. "Every drop of rain wants to return to the cloud. Every moment wants to be relived. Every goodbye wants to become a hello." She looked at me, and her ancient eyes held a depth I couldn't measure. "You've felt it too," she said. "The desire to go back. To undo. To rise instead of fall. I had felt it. So many times. So many moments I wished I could reverse." The droplets continued their ascent around us, a silent storm in reverse. "What happens when they reach the sky?" I asked. She looked up, watching them disappear. "They become clouds again. They wait. They fall again. The cycle never ends." She lowered her gaze to me. "Just like us. just like everything. She stepped back. She began to fade, the way she always did. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time something rises when it should fall. Every time the world reminds you that nothing is permanent. I'll be there, in the droplets. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the rising rain. I stood there for a long time, watching the droplets climb. They rose for hours, until every puddle was dry, until every trace of rain had returned to the sky. The pavement beneath me was dry now, ordinary, as if the rain had never happened. I walked home through the dry streets. The night was ordinary again. But I carried the memory of rising water, of reversed rain, of a world that sometimes forgets its habits. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the rain has stopped and the streets are wet, I watch. I wait. I remember. And once in a while, I see a single droplet rise. Just one. Just enough to remind me. I felt a droplet hit my cheek, but it came from below. And I understood that some things are meant to rise. Even when everything tells them to fall. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. And tonight, she was there. She stood in the middle of a puddle. A large one, spreading across the intersection, reflecting the streetlight and the buildings and the dark sky above. I stopped. I watched. Her feet were in the water. I could see them, submerged, surrounded by the gleam of the puddle. But her reflection was different. Her reflection was dry. Where she stood in water, her reflection stood on solid ground. Where her feet were wet, her reflection's feet were on pavement that had no puddle at all. The reflection showed a different world, a world where the rain had never fallen, where the streets were dry and ordinary. I stared at the impossible image. Her reflection moved when she moved, copied her gestures, matched her stillness. But it was dry. Always dry. She looked at me with those ancient eyes and smiled that small smile. "You see it," she said. I nodded. "Your reflection. It's dry." She looked down at the puddle, at her dry reflection looking back at her. "It's always dry," she said. "It lives in a different world. A world where the rain never falls. Where the streets are always dry. Where time moves differently." I stepped closer, careful not to disturb the puddle. "Can I see it? That world?" She shook her head slowly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some worlds are only visible in reflections." She raised her hand. Her reflection raised its hand too, but slower, as if moving through something thicker than air. "In that world," she said, "I'm not standing in water. I'm standing on dry ground. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. Everything is ordinary and beautiful." She lowered her hand. Her reflection lowered its hand too, matching her exactly. "But I can't go there," she said. "I can only visit through reflections. Through puddles and windows and mirrors. I can see that world, but I can never step into it." I looked at her reflection. It seemed peaceful. Content. Unbothered by the wet world it reflected. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. She looked at me, and her ancient eyes held that deep patience, that ancient knowing. Because you need to understand that there are other worlds. Other versions of yourself. Other possibilities. They're all around you, all the time, reflected in every puddle, every window, every mirror. She gestured at the puddle. Somewhere, in another reflection, you're walking home on a dry street. You're not tired. You're not lonely. You're happy. I looked at my own reflection in the puddle. It was there, normal, wet, matching my world. But I can't reach it, I said. She shook her head. Not yet. But you can remember it. You can know that it exists. And sometimes, that knowing is enough. She stepped out of the puddle. Her reflection stayed for a moment, still standing on dry ground, then faded as the water settled. She stood beside me on the dry edge of the puddle, both of us looking at our reflections in the water. I saw myself, wet and tired. She saw herself, dry and peaceful. Will I ever see that other world? I asked. She smiled. That small smile. Every time you look at a reflection and wonder. Every time you imagine another version of yourself. That other world is there, waiting for you to believe in it. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you stand in a puddle and look at your reflection. Every time you wonder what else might be possible. I'll be there, in the dry version of myself. Then she was gone, and I was alone with the puddle and my reflection. I stood there for a long time, looking at myself in the water. Tired. Wet. Ordinary. But somewhere, in another reflection, another version of me was walking on dry ground, happy and peaceful. I carried that thought home with me. It didn't change my life. It didn't make me less tired. But it gave me something I hadn't had before. Hope. I still walk that route every night. I still pass the corner of 5th and Wells. And sometimes, when there's a puddle, I stop. I look at my reflection. And I remember. Somewhere, in another world, I'm dry. I'm happy. I'm home. She stood in a puddle, and her reflection was dry. And I understood that every reflection holds a different world. I just have to learn how to step into it. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the streetlight, the wet pavement, the ordinary night. But something was happening. I felt it before I saw it. A gathering at my feet. The rainwater that covered the pavement was moving, flowing toward me, collecting around my shoes. Not dramatically, not violently. Gently, like water finding its own level. I looked down. The puddle around my feet grew larger, deeper, swallowing more of the street. It spread in a perfect circle, its edges sharp and defined, as if drawn by an invisible hand. Then it began to rise. Droplets lifted from the surface. Not splashing, not spraying. Rising. They climbed into the air, slow and deliberate, catching the streetlight like tiny stars ascending. More followed, then more, until a column of water rose from the puddle at my feet, stretching upward like invisible threads reaching for the sky. I stood in the center of it, water rising all around me, defying everything I knew about gravity and rain and the way the world should work. The droplets climbed higher, disappearing into the darkness above, returning to the clouds they had fallen from hours ago. I reached out and touched one. It was cool, solid, real. It continued upward, passing through my fingers as if I were the ghost, not it. The column grew thinner as it rose, the droplets spreading, becoming mist, becoming memory. Soon there was nothing left but the dry pavement where the puddle had been, and the faint sense of water still climbing somewhere above. I looked up. The clouds were there, dark and patient, receiving what had been returned to them. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me through the dry street, her eyes fixed on the spot where the water had risen. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "You felt it," she said. I nodded. The water. It rose. Went back to the clouds. She smiled. That small smile. It does that sometimes. When it's ready. When it's called. Who calls it? She looked up at the clouds, then back at me. The sky. The memory of where it came from. The longing to return. She reached out and touched my chest, right over my heart. "You feel it too," she said. "The longing. The desire to go back. To return to where you came from." I did feel it. I had always felt it. A pull towards something I couldn't name, a homesickness for a place I had never been. "Where do I go?" I asked. "How do I return?" She shook her head slowly. "Not yet. Not now. You're still needed here, in this world, on this street. But someday, when you're ready, you'll rise too. Like the rain. Like invisible threads reaching for the sky." She stepped back. She began to fade. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. "Every time it rains. Every time the water remembers where it came from. I'll be there, rising with it." Then she was gone, and I was alone on the dry pavement, the memory of risen water still fresh in my mind. I stood there for a long time, looking up at the clouds. They were dark and patient, holding the rain that would fall again someday. The rain that had risen from my feet was somewhere up there, waiting to fall again, waiting to complete its endless cycle. I walked home through the dry streets. The night was ordinary again, but I carried the memory of impossible water, of rising rain, of longing made visible. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the rain has fallen and the streets are wet, I stop at the corner of 5th and Wells. I look down at my feet. I wait. And once in a while, the water gathers. It rises. It climbs toward the sky like invisible threads. And I remember that someday, I'll rise too. The rain gathered at my feet, then rose like invisible threads to the clouds. And I understood that everything longs to return to where it came from. Even me. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. The rain had stopped, but I always carried my umbrella. Habit. The one I had bought years ago, black and ordinary, worn at the edges. I hadn't needed it tonight, but I kept it in my hand, a familiar weight. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the streetlight, the wet pavement, the ordinary night. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was tiredness. Maybe it was something else, something I didn't understand. But I pressed the button, and the umbrella sprang open above my head. The ground beneath me stayed dark and wet. I looked up. The umbrella was open, fully extended, black against the night sky. It should have cast a shadow. It should have blocked the light, created a circle of dry pavement where the rain couldn't reach. But the ground beneath me was as wet as everywhere else. Dark, gleaming, reflecting the streetlight as if the umbrella wasn't there. I moved the umbrella left. The ground stayed wet. I moved it right. Still wet. I held it directly above my head, tilted it, turned it. Nothing changed. The pavement beneath me remained dark and wet, untouched by the shadow my umbrella should have cast. I closed it. Opened it. Closed it again. Each time, the same result. No shadow. No dry circle. Just wet pavement, gleaming under the streetlight, indifferent to my attempts to block its light. I stood there, holding my useless umbrella, trying to understand. The umbrella was real. I could feel it in my hand, see it above my head. But it wasn't doing what umbrellas do. It wasn't casting a shadow. It wasn't protecting the ground from light or rain. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me slowly, her eyes fixed on the open umbrella above my head. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "It doesn't work," I said. "The umbrella. It won't cast a shadow." She smiled. That small smile. "It's not supposed to," she said. "Not tonight." I looked up at the umbrella, then back at her. "Then why did I open it?" She stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the faint lines around her eyes, the slight smile on her lips. "Because you needed to see," she said. "You needed to understand that some things don't work the way they're supposed to. Some umbrellas don't cast shadows. Some rain doesn't fall. Some nights don't end." She reached up and touched the fabric of the umbrella. Her fingers passed through it as if it weren't there. "This umbrella isn't for protection," she said. "It's for remembering." "Remembering what?" She looked at me, and her ancient eyes held that deep patience, that ancient knowing. "Remembering that you're not always protected. That the world doesn't always make sense. That sometimes you have to stand in the wet and the dark and the ordinary, even when you've opened your umbrella." She let her hand fall. The umbrella stayed open above me, useless and beautiful. "Close it," she said. I pressed the button. The umbrella closed with a soft click. The ground beneath me was still wet, still dark, still ordinary. But something had changed. I felt lighter. More present. More real. She stepped back. She began to fade. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. "Every time you open an umbrella and nothing happens. Every time you expect protection and find none. I'll be there, in the wet ground beneath your feet." Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner, holding my closed umbrella, standing on wet pavement that reflected the streetlight. I walked home slowly, the umbrella tucked under my arm. The streets were the same. The buildings were the same. But I was different. I had learned that some tools don't work, some protections fail, some umbrellas don't cast shadows. And that was okay. I still walk that route every night. I still carry my umbrella. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the ground is wet, I open it. I hold it above my head. I watch the ground beneath me stay dark and wet. No shadow. No protection. Just me, standing in the ordinary night, remembering what she taught me. I opened my umbrella, and the ground beneath stayed dark and wet. And I understood that some things aren't about protection. They're about presence. About standing in the rain, even when your umbrella doesn't work. The rain had been falling for hours, a steady downpour that soaked through my coat and dripped from the edges of my hood. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. Tonight, the shadows were hidden under water. The streets were rivers, the gutters were streams, and I was soaked to the bone. I didn't care. I was too tired to care. I just wanted to get home, peel off my wet clothes, and fall into bed. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. And tonight, she was there. She stood in the middle of the intersection, facing the sky, her arms at her sides. The rain fell around her, soaking her hair, her coat, her shoes. She didn't seem to notice. She just stood there, looking up. I stopped at the edge of the intersection, watching her. The rain poured down, relentless and cold. Then she looked up. Not at me. At the sky. At the clouds. At the rain itself. And the rain paused. Every droplet stopped in midair. Thousands of them, millions, frozen in their fall, hanging suspended between the clouds and the ground. They caught the streetlight, glittering like a billion tiny stars, like the whole sky had turned to diamonds and stopped breathing. I stood there, my mouth open, watching the impossible sight. The rain had stopped falling. It was just hanging there. Waiting. Then it reversed. The droplets began to rise. Slowly at first, then faster, climbing back toward the clouds they had fallen from. The whole downpour reversed itself, water returning to the sky, leaving the streets dry, the gutters empty, the world untouched by rain. Within seconds, the air was clear. The clouds above began to thin, to break apart, to reveal patches of night sky and distant stars. She lowered her gaze and looked at me. I walked toward her through the dry street. When I reached her, I stopped and looked at her with wonder I couldn't hide. "You did that," I said. She nodded slowly. "I did." "How?" She looked up at the clearing sky, then back at me. "The rain listens. It always listens. Most people just never ask." She reached out and caught one last droplet that had lingered behind. It rested in her palm for a moment, then evaporated, returning to the air. "The rain doesn't want to fall," she said. "It wants to be where it came from. It falls because it has to, because gravity demands it. But if you ask, if you really ask, it will go back." I looked up at the clearing sky. The clouds were almost gone now, revealing stars I hadn't seen in weeks. "Why did you ask it to go back?" I asked. She smiled. That small smile. "Because you were tired. Because you were soaked. Because you needed to get home without getting wetter." She touched my cheek, dry now, warm. "I did it for you." I felt tears in my eyes. Not from sadness. From gratitude. From being seen. "You didn't have to," I said. "I know." She lowered her hand. "But I wanted to." She stepped back. She began to fade, the way she always did. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. "Every time it rains. Every time you look up and ask. I'll be there, in the pause between the falling and the rising." Then she was gone, and I was alone on the dry street, under a clearing sky. I walked home through streets that had never been wet. The gutters were dry. The pavement was dry. My coat was dry. It was as if the rain had never happened. But I knew it had. I had seen it pause. I had seen it reverse. I had seen her ask, and the rain listen. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when it rains, I stop at the corner of 5th and Wells. I look up. I ask. And sometimes, just sometimes, the rain pauses. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remind me. She looked up, and the downpour paused mid-air, then reversed. And I learned that even the rain can listen. If you know how to ask. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the streetlight, the wet pavement, the ordinary night. But something was happening. I heard it first. A sound like water moving, but wrong. Backward. Uphill. Defying everything I knew about how water should flow. I looked down at the gutter. The water was running backward. Not downstream, toward the drain. Upstream, away from the drain. Silver streams of rainwater, gleaming in the streetlight, flowing uphill against the natural slope of the street. They moved silently, steadily, gathering momentum as they climbed. I watched, mesmerized, as the gutters reversed their flow. Water that had been heading toward the sewer now turned and ran the other way, following some invisible command, some impossible gravity. The streams grew wider, faster. They joined together, forming rivulets, then small rivers, all flowing backward, all climbing toward something I couldn't see. I followed them with my eyes. They flowed up the street, past buildings, past streetlights, disappearing around a corner. I wanted to follow, to see where they were going. But my feet wouldn't move. The water continued its impossible journey. Silver streams in the darkness, defying everything, beautiful and wrong. And then I saw where they were going. The sky. The streams weren't just flowing backward along the street. They were flowing upward. At the end of the block, where the street curved out of sight, the water rose. It lifted from the gutters in silver arcs, climbing into the air, returning to the clouds it had fallen from hours ago. I stood there, watching the water rise. It was beautiful. So beautiful it hurt. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me slowly, her eyes fixed on the rising water. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "The gutters run backward," I said. "The water is going back to the sky." She nodded. "It does that sometimes. When it remembers where it came from." I looked at the rising streams, silver against the dark sky. "Everything wants to go home," she said. "Even rain. Even water. Even us." She reached out and took my hand. Her touch was warm, solid, real. "Watch," she said. We stood together, watching the water rise. Stream after stream lifted from the gutters, climbing into the night, returning to the clouds. The streets grew dry beneath them, the gutters empty, the world cleansed of rain. When the last drop had risen, the sky was clear. Stars shone where clouds had been. The night was ordinary again. She squeezed my hand, then let go. "You see," she said. "Nothing is permanent. Not rain. Not grief. Not even gravity." She stepped back. She began to fade. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time water defies gravity. Every time something goes home. I'll be there, in the silver streams. Then she was gone, and I was alone on the dry street, under the clear sky. I stood there for a long time, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, the rain was returning, becoming clouds, waiting to fall again. The cycle never ended. The longing never stopped. I walked home through the dry streets. The gutters were empty. The pavement was dry. The world was ordinary again. But I carried the memory of silver streams, of water rising, of things returning home. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, after the rain, I stop at the corner of 5th and Wells. I listen. I watch. And once in a while, I hear it. The soft sound of water running backward. The silver gleam of streams climbing skyward. And I remember that everything wants to go home. Even me. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner where the sky opened wide, where I could see the horizon between 2 buildings. The sky was dark, heavy with clouds, promising more rain. I had been walking under that sky for hours, feeling its weight, its patience. I looked up. The storm was forming in reverse. Clouds that had been dark and swollen began to thin, to lighten, to retreat. They didn't drift, they dissolved, unraveling like threads pulled from a tapestry. The darkness lifted, peeling away in layers, revealing blue sky beneath. I watched, transfixed, as the storm unbirthed itself. Thunder rolled backward, becoming silence. Lightning flashed inward, disappearing into the clouds it had come from. Raindrops that hadn't yet fallen rose instead, climbing back into the dissolving clouds, returning to the vapor they had been. The clouds shrank, contracted, became smaller and smaller until they were just wisps, just suggestions, just memories of clouds. Then they were gone, and the sky was clear blue, deep and infinite, as if a storm had never existed. I stood there, my mouth open, trying to understand what I had just seen. A storm, forming in reverse. Clouds unbirthing themselves into blue. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me slowly, her eyes fixed on the clear sky above. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "You saw it," she said. I nodded. The storm. It formed backward. It disappeared. She smiled. That small smile. It didn't disappear. It unbecame. There's a difference. I looked up at the blue sky. It was so clear, so empty, so peaceful. "What's the difference?" I asked. She looked up too, her ancient eyes reflecting the blue. Disappearing is leaving. Unbecoming is returning. The storm didn't go away, it went back. Back to the place before it was a storm. Back to the potential, the possibility, the waiting. She lowered her gaze to me. "Everything can unbecome," she said. "If it remembers how." I thought about that. About all the things I wished could unbecome. Mistakes. Regrets. Painful moments. Can we unbecome? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "We can. But it's harder. We're more tangled. More attached to what we've become. She reached out and touched my chest, right over my heart. But parts of us can unbecome. The parts that aren't really us. The fears, the sorrows, the weights we carry. They can unbecome. They can return to the nothing they came from. She let her hand fall. The storm showed you that. It showed you that nothing is permanent. Not even weather. Not even pain. I looked up at the blue sky. It was so peaceful. So empty. So full of potential. Will it come back? I asked. The storm? She nodded slowly. Eventually. Storms always come back. But not this one. This one is gone, returned to the place before storms. A new storm will come, different, with its own rain and thunder. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time something unbecomes. Every time you watch a storm dissolve into blue. I'll be there, in the space between what was and what will be. Then she was gone, and I was alone under the clear sky. I stood there for a long time, looking up at the blue. It was so deep, so infinite, so full of peace. The storm was gone, but its memory lingered. The memory of unbecoming. I walked home through the ordinary streets, under an ordinary sky. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. I had watched a storm unbecome. I had seen clouds dissolve into blue. I had learned that things can return to where they came from. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the sky is dark and heavy, I stop at the corner where I can see the horizon. I watch the clouds. I wait. And once in a while, I see it again. A storm forming in reverse. Clouds unbirthing themselves into blue. And I remember that even the heaviest things can unbecome. Can return to the nothing they came from. Leaving only blue. Only peace. Only potential. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was soaked. The rain had caught me halfway home, a sudden downpour that left no time for shelter. My coat was heavy with water, my hair plastered to my scalp, my shoes squelching with every step. I was tired, cold, and desperate for my apartment. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. And tonight, she was there. She stood under the streetlight, facing me, her arms at her sides. Her face was calm, patient, those ancient eyes watching me approach. She was dry. Completely dry, as if the rain had never touched her. I stopped a few feet away, dripping on the wet pavement. "You're dry," I said. Stupid, obvious, but all I could manage. She smiled. That small smile. I know. I looked down at myself, at the water running off my coat, at the puddle forming around my feet. I'm not. She stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the absence of wetness, the presence of something I couldn't name. I know that too, she said. She raised her hand. Slowly, gently, she reached out and touched my shoulder. The moment her fingers made contact, I felt it. Warmth. Spreading from her touch, through my coat, through my skin, through my bones. It spread across my shoulder, down my arm, across my chest, through my entire body. The water on my clothes began to evaporate. I watched, amazed, as steam rose from my coat, from my sleeves, from my shoes. The rainwater that had soaked me for hours lifted into the air, becoming vapor. Disappearing into the night. Within seconds, I was dry. Completely dry. As if the rain had never touched me. I looked at her. She was still touching my shoulder, her ancient eyes soft. "How?" I whispered. She lowered her hand. "The rain that fell on you hours ago, it was still there. Waiting. Clinging. It hadn't forgotten you." She looked at the steam still rising around us. I just reminded it that it could leave. That it didn't have to stay. I touched my own shoulder, where her hand had been. It was warm. Dry. Ordinary. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "You're welcome." She stepped back. She began to fade, the way she always did. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. "Every time you're soaked and need to be dry. Every time you need to let go of what's been clinging to you. I'll be there, ready to touch your shoulder." Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner, dry and warm under the streetlight. I stood there for a long time, just feeling. The absence of wetness. The absence of cold. The absence of the weight I had been carrying. I walked home through the ordinary night, my clothes dry, my shoes dry, my heart lighter than it had been in years. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when I'm caught in the rain, when I'm soaked and cold and tired, I remember her touch. I remember the warmth. I remember that the rain can leave, that it doesn't have to stay. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the street is empty, I feel a hand on my shoulder. Gentle. Warm. Real. And the rain that soaked me hours ago evaporates. She touched my shoulder, and the rain that had soaked me hours ago evaporated. And I learned that some things don't have to cling to us forever. They can be let go. They can rise. They can disappear into the night. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the block where the sewer grates lined the street. They were ordinary, the kind you step over without thinking, the kind that hide the darkness below the city. Tonight, they were breathing. Mist rose from every grate. Not steam, not smoke, something softer, whiter, more alive. It curled upward in gentle spirals, spreading as it climbed, reaching toward the tops of the buildings. I stopped and watched. The mist climbed higher, wrapping around lampposts, sliding up brick walls, seeping through windows of abandoned buildings. It moved like it had purpose, like it knew where it was going. Like ghosts. I thought of ghosts as I watched. Pale figures, silent and patient, climbing the buildings in the dark. The mist had their shape, their weightlessness, their quiet insistence. It climbed and climbed, covering everything in a thin layer of white. I reached out to touch it. My hand passed through, leaving a trail of disturbed air that quickly filled again. It was cold. Not freezing, but cool, like the breath of something that had been waiting underground for a long time. I looked down through the grate. Darkness below. Nothing visible. But I could feel it. Something down there, breathing out, sending its mist into the night. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me through the mist, her form half hidden by the white. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "The grates are exhaling," she said. I nodded. "Mist. It's climbing the buildings. She looked up, watching the mist rise. Her face was calm, peaceful. "They've been holding that for a long time," she said. "All the water, all the darkness, all the things that fall through the grates. They've been waiting for the right night to let it out." "What is it?" I asked. "What's in the mist?" She looked at me, and her ancient eyes held something I couldn't name. "Memories," she said. "The city's memories. Everything that's ever been lost down there, dropped keys, old letters, forgotten dreams. They dissolve, become part of the dark, become mist. And on nights like this, they rise." She reached out and caught a strand of mist in her palm. It curled there for a moment, then continued upward. "Somewhere in that mist," she said, "is a key to a door that no longer exists. A letter that was never sent. A wish that was never spoken." I watched the mist climb higher. It covered the buildings now, making them look soft, unreal, like buildings in a dream. "Are they ghosts?" I asked. "The things in the mist?" She shook her head slowly. "Not ghosts. Echoes. Reminders. The city doesn't forget what it's lost. It just stores it underground, waits for the right moment, and lets it rise." She stepped closer. The mist swirled around us both. "Listen," she said. I listened. In the mist, I heard faint sounds. A distant voice. A soft laugh. The rustle of paper. The click of a lock. Things that had been lost, rising with the mist, becoming almost audible. "They're saying goodbye," she said. "Or maybe hello. It's hard to tell with echoes." I stood there, surrounded by the city's memories, feeling the weight of all that had been lost and was now rising. The mist continued its climb. Higher and higher, until it reached the rooftops, until it touched the sky. Then it began to fade, to thin, to disappear into the night. Within minutes, it was gone. The buildings were solid again. The grates were still. The city was ordinary. She was still there, watching me. "They'll come back," she said. "On another night. When the conditions are right. When the city needs to remember." She stepped back. She began to fade. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. "Every time the grates exhale. Every time the mist climbs the buildings. I'll be there, in the echoes." Then she was gone, and I was alone on the street, the last traces of mist dissolving around me. I walked home through the ordinary night. The buildings were solid. The grates were still. But I carried the memory of mist, of echoes, of a city breathing out its lost things. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the night is right, I see it again. Mist rising from the grates, climbing the buildings like ghosts. And I remember that the city never forgets. It just stores things underground, waiting for the right moment to let them rise. The sewer grates exhaled mist that climbed the buildings like ghosts. And I understood that even lost things can rise again. Even if only for one night. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the streetlight, the wet pavement, the ordinary night. But something was wrong. The air felt thick. Heavy. Wet in a way that had nothing to do with rain. I opened my mouth to breathe, and instead of air, I drew in water. Not a lot. Just a mouthful. But it was water. I could taste it, feel it on my tongue, cold and clean. I should have choked, should have coughed, should have struggled. Instead, I breathed it in. The water entered my lungs. I felt it fill them, cold and smooth. It should have been impossible. It should have killed me. I exhaled. Clean, dry air left my mouth. Warm and ordinary, as if I had been breathing normally all along. I stood there, trying to understand. I had breathed in water. I had exhaled air. My lungs felt fine. Better than fine. Clean. Refreshed. I opened my mouth and breathed in again. More water, drawn from the heavy air around me. It filled my lungs, cold and pure. I exhaled. Dry air. Warm air. Ordinary air. I did it again. And again. Each time, water in, air out. My body had become something else, something that could transform the impossible into the ordinary. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me slowly, her eyes fixed on me with that ancient knowing. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "You're breathing water," she said. I nodded. "And exhaling air. Clean air." She smiled. That small smile. "You're learning." "Learning what?" She stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence, the reality of her existence. "That the world isn't what you think. That air and water are the same thing, seen differently. That you can breathe anything if you know how." She reached out and touched my chest, right over my lungs. "You've been breathing fear for years," she said. "Doubt. Loneliness. Regret. They've been filling your lungs, making it hard to breathe. But now you know. You can breathe them in and exhale something else." I felt it then. The truth of her words. All the years of heavy breathing, of lungs full of things that weren't air. And now, this impossible gift, the ability to transform. "What do I exhale?" I asked. She looked at me with those ancient eyes. "Whatever you want. Peace. Hope. Love. The choice is yours." She stepped back. She began to fade. "Will I see you again?" I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. "Every time you breathe in something impossible and exhale something beautiful. I'll be there, in the space between." Then she was gone, and I was alone on the corner, breathing water and exhaling air. I stood there for a long time, practicing. Water in. Air out. Each breath lighter than the last. Each exhale cleaner than the one before. When I finally walked home, my lungs were full of light. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the air is heavy with things that aren't air, I breathe them in. Fear. Doubt. Regret. I breathe them deep, feel them fill me. And then I exhale. Peace. Hope. Love. Clean and dry and warm. I breathed in water and exhaled clean, dry air. And I learned that I can breathe anything. And transform it into something beautiful. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. And tonight, she was there. But something was different. The rain had started again. Not heavy, just a gentle drizzle, falling from the clouds in the usual way. I could feel it on my face, on my coat, on my hands. Ordinary rain, falling down. But she stood in the middle of it, and not a single drop touched her. I watched, amazed, as the rain fell all around her, a perfect circle of dryness where she stood. Drops that should have landed on her shoulders curved away at the last moment, deflected by something I couldn't see. They fell past her, around her, but never on her. She was dry. Completely dry, in the middle of a downpour. I walked closer, my own face wet, my coat soaked. When I reached the edge of her dry circle, I stopped. The rain fell on me, but not on her. The boundary was sharp, visible, impossible. How? I asked. She looked at me with those ancient eyes and smiled that small smile. The rain knows me, she said. It knows I don't want to be wet. So it falls around me instead. She raised her hand and caught a drop that was falling toward her shoulder. It hovered in her palm for a moment, then continued downward, curving away from her body. I don't stop it, she said. I just ask. Politely. And the rain listens. I stepped into her dry circle. Immediately, the rain stopped falling on me. I stood beside her, completely dry, while the downpour continued all around us. I looked up. Drops fell toward us, then curved away at the last second, creating a perfect dome of dryness. It was beautiful. Impossible. Real. How long can we stay here? I asked. She shrugged gently. As long as we want. The rain is patient. It doesn't mind waiting. We stood together in the dry circle, watching the rain fall all around us. The street was a curtain of water, silver in the streetlight, beautiful and alive. Why are you showing me this? I asked. She looked at me, and her ancient eyes held that deep patience, that ancient knowing. Because you need to know that you can ask. That the world will listen. That you don't have to be soaked by everything that falls. She reached out and touched my wet coat. Where her fingers touched, the fabric dried instantly. You've been letting things fall on you for too long, she said. Rain. Grief. Loneliness. You just stand there and take it. But you don't have to. She lowered her hand. You can ask. You can create your own dry circle. You can let the rain fall around you instead of on you. I felt tears in my eyes. Not from sadness. From recognition. I don't know how, I said. She smiled. That small smile. Yes, you do. You've been learning all along. Every impossible thing you've seen, every gift you've been given, they've been teaching you. You know how to ask. You just haven't tried. She stepped back, out of the dry circle. Immediately, rain began to fall on her. She didn't seem to mind. It's time, she said. Time to try. She began to fade, the way she always did. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time you stand in the rain and stay dry. Every time you ask and the world listens. I'll be there, in the circle with you. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the dry circle, rain falling all around me. I stood there for a long time, just feeling. The dryness. The peace. The knowledge that I could ask. Then I stepped out of the circle. Rain fell on me immediately, soaking my coat, my hair, my face. But I didn't mind. I knew now that I could step back in any time I wanted. I walked home through the rain, wet but peaceful. When I reached my apartment, I stood outside for a moment, looking up at the sky. "Thank you," I whispered. The rain didn't answer. But I felt it. A shift. A listening. I walked inside, dry where it mattered. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the rain falls, I stop at the corner of 5th and Wells. I stand still. I ask. And the rain falls around me instead of on me. She walked through the upside-down rain without a single drop landing. And I learned that I can too. I just have to remember to ask. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gleaming under the streetlights like the skin of something that had just emerged from deep water. I was walking home from the late shift, the same route I had walked for 3 years. Left at the coffee shop, right at the bookstore, straight for 6 blocks, left at the old theater. I knew every crack in the pavement, every hum of every streetlight, every shadow that fell across my path. I was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavy. My feet dragged against the pavement, each step an effort. I just wanted to get home, fall into bed, and forget the world existed for a few hours. I reached the corner of 5th and Wells. The same corner where I had seen her so many times before. She wasn't there tonight. Just the streetlight, the wet pavement, the ordinary night. But something was happening. The city was washing itself clean. I felt it before I saw it. A drying. A lifting. The wetness on the pavement was disappearing, not by evaporation, not by absorption, but by something else. It was being gathered, collected, pulled away by forces I couldn't see. I watched as a patch of wet pavement in front of me turned dry. The water didn't sink in or rise up, it just vanished, leaving behind perfectly dry concrete. Another patch followed. Then another. The street was drying in sections, like someone was wiping it clean with an invisible cloth. The gutters emptied. The puddles shrank. The gleam of streetlight on wet surface faded block by block, until the entire street was dry. But it wasn't just dry. It was too dry. The kind of dry that comes after weeks without rain, not minutes. The pavement looked parched, thirsty, ancient. And yet, I could still feel the wet. In the air. In my lungs. In the memory of rain that clung to everything. The city had washed itself clean of weather, but it couldn't wash away the memory. The wet was still there, in the way the air moved, in the way the streetlights seemed to shimmer, in the way my skin remembered the touch of water. I stood in the middle of the dry street, surrounded by the memory of wet. I heard footsteps. I turned. She was there, walking toward me slowly, her eyes fixed on the dry pavement. When she reached me, she stopped and looked at me with those ancient eyes. "The city has washed itself clean," she said. I nodded. But I can still feel it. The wet. The rain. It's still here, somehow. She smiled. That small smile. That's the memory. The city can wash away the weather, but it can't wash away what the weather left behind. The feeling of rain. The smell of wet pavement. The way the light looks different after a storm. She looked around at the dry streets, the parched pavement, the shimmering air. "It's all still here," she said. "Just beneath the surface. Waiting to be remembered." I reached out and touched the air. It felt wet. It felt like rain, even though no rain was falling. "How do I carry this?" I asked. "The memory?" She looked at me with those ancient eyes. "You just do. You let it settle into your bones. You let it become part of you. The next time it rains, you'll remember this moment. The dry streets, the memory of wet, the way the city cleansed itself." She stepped closer. "And you'll know that nothing really disappears. It just changes form. Rain becomes memory, Memory becomes part of us. We become part of the city. She reached out and touched my chest, right over my heart. It's in there now, she said. The wet. The rain. The memory. You'll carry it forever. She stepped back. She began to fade. Will I see you again? I asked. Her smile was the last thing to go. Every time it rains. Every time the city washes itself clean. Every time you remember what the wet felt like. I'll be there, in the memory. Then she was gone, and I was alone on the dry street, surrounded by the memory of rain. I stood there for a long time, just feeling. The dry pavement under my feet. The wet memory in my bones. The city, clean and waiting. I walked home through streets that had forgotten rain. But I hadn't forgotten. I carried the wet with me, in my lungs, in my heart, in the part of me that remembers. I still walk that route every night. And sometimes, when the streets are dry and the air is still, I stop at the corner of 5th and Wells. I close my eyes. I remember. And the city, even washed clean of weather, feels wet again. Just for a moment. Just for me. The city was washing itself clean of weather, and leaving only the memory of wet. And I understood that some things never really leave. They just change form. And wait to be remembered.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.